Tonight, a deadline and an ultimatum. President Trump's warning to Hamas over the remaining hostages. Will the terror group comply, or will tensions explode? Plus, a bombshell shakeup in Washington. The unprecedented move that could reshape America's schools. And Europe on edge. With U.S. military aid to Ukraine on hold, European leaders scramble to rearm as President Trump signals they're on their own.
We need to scale up, we need to be prepared, we need to produce, and we need to protect.
And a hidden Christian past.
What it produced was this really significant, what I like to call high-octane church.
Tunisia, a Muslim-majority nation, holds a surprising spiritual legacy from ancient martyrs to a faith that still endures today. All A major break in American policy. The United States is negotiating with Hamas as millions of lives hang in the balance. Good evening and welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, a standoff over hostages. Hamas defiant tonight, refusing to immediately release all remaining people in captivity per President Trump's ultimatum or face total destruction. Instead, the terror group says it will only free the remaining hostages in exchange for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The president issued his warning after Wednesday's Oval Office meeting with freed Israeli hostages. Hamas, though, fired back, accusing Mr. Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of breaking January's tenuous deal that included hostage releases, a ceasefire, and an Israeli withdrawal. Also, in a major shift, the White House is holding direct talks with Hamas, a rare move that bypasses Israel. Jerusalem, though, has joined Trump's call for all hostages to be released. Well, CBN senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright joins us now to discuss the latest efforts on a permanent ceasefire. But first, Kelly, let's talk about that extraordinary meeting between President Trump and the hostages in the White House.
Extraordinary indeed, John. The White House posted the video on X. It shows 8 hostages held in captivity since the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7, 2023. Each of these hostages thanked President Trump for helping them to be released. Watch this.
Were you all taken on October 7th? Yes. So this was hell, huh?
It was the worst thing that anybody can go through. One of the days they handcuffed one of the boys that was with us, and when he came, and he brought a cutter and he cut his hand and smiled. They used to eat in front of us while they starved us.
It's a miracle.
That you're living?
Yes.
I was kidnapped on 7 October. My wife and my 2 daughters been murdered on the same day. I was held in captivity 491 days. I've been suffered there from starvation, violence, and humiliations daily. One time, they broke in my ribs, and I was so hurt that I couldn't breathe for 1 month. Thanks to President Trump, I'm a free man.
My family and I myself, we believe you've been sent by God to release them.
Quite a remarkable moment for the hostages and the president there at the Resolute desk inside the Oval Office, John.
Kelly, in a related matter, the Trump administration is still working to end the war between Israel and Hamas, with the goal, of course, of Hamas returning all the remaining 58 hostages back to Israel. Kelly, the president also, though, acknowledged that his team is actually in direct talks with Hamas, a known terrorist organization. Kelly, this goes against U.S. foreign policy, never to negotiate with terrorists. So why has the Trump administration taken this unprecedented step?
Well, John, here's the short of it. The president believes in order to achieve peace in the Middle East that he needs to talk to all of the parties involved in the conflict, including Hamas. To that end, his team talked to Hamas to lay the groundwork for negotiating a permanent ceasefire. And following those talks with Hamas and his emotional meeting, as we've just witnessed with the hostages in the Oval Office, Mr. Trump took to Truth Social to issue a final stern warning to Hamas, stating this: release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you, the president adding, only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. And then in Tel Aviv, relatives of the remaining hostages and those families took to the streets to call or to champion the cause of the remaining hostages. They are urging President Trump to do all that he can to ensure to help end the war and bring the hostages home now.
I address from here to President Donald Trump. You've met yesterday our heroes, real heroes, that survived the most horrible things the human mind can imagine. They were released just a few days ago with all the pain and with their very hard physical and mental condition. They crossed the ocean to meet you, to remind you, to ask you to save the ones they left behind.
An emotional plea there, Kelly. On to matters, though, here at home. Can you talk about the latest that's going on with President Trump's tariffs, particularly with our neighbors to the south in Mexico?
John, it's a big deal. Right after speaking to the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, President Trump says he is freezing tariffs on Mexico now. He stated on Truth Social that he and the president of Mexico and the United States share a very good relationship and are working hard together on the border to stop illegal aliens from entering the United States, as well as stopping fentanyl. That's why he's done this.
Kelly Wright. Thank you, Kelly. Well, on to another seismic shift, this one inside the federal government. The president reportedly is taking steps to abolish the Department of Education as soon as today. It's part of his campaign promise to give more state control over education. A draft executive order directs newly confirmed Education Secretary Linda McMahon to begin plans for dismantling the department. The order acknowledges that it requires an act of Congress to shut down the federal agency, but directs the secretary to take, quote, all necessary steps as permitted by law to prepare for the closure. Well, with me now is Jonathan Butcher, a senior research fellow in education policy with the Heritage Foundation. Jonathan, welcome to you. So what would shutting down the Department of Education actually look like in practice, and what would that mean for public schools across the country?
Well, parents and teachers should welcome this because the Department of Education really makes up a small part of the per student funding for each child in the U.S. But there's an outsized share of regulations and rules that comes from Washington over how schools can operate. I think some of the essential services that many families depend on, like school meals, are actually run by other agencies. So closing down the department will not mean that students are going to receive less services. And I actually think in crucial terms, states will have more authority to enact changes that we need to raise student achievement.
You talked about some of these essential services. However, the department does oversee federal funding for programs for low-income students and those with disabilities. So what would you say to parents and educators who maybe are concerned that eliminating the department could lead to greater disparities in education across the states?
Well, either through a provision known as GEPA in federal law that allows the secretary to work with other agencies to transfer certain responsibilities, or through legislation from Congress. I think it would be wise to move programs like IDEA over to the Department of Health and Human Services. Offices and responsibilities related to civil rights should move to the Department of Justice. So I think that there are clear ways that the agency can move these essential services to other parts of the federal government and still protect young people. And I think that should come as a relief to parents that there will be a thoughtful approach to dismantling this agency.
Jonathan, given that congressional approval is required, what do you see as the chances of this passing? And if Congress does not have the votes, what are some maybe other steps the administration could take to chip away at the influence and power of the Department of Education?
Well, I think those on both sides of the aisle who are interested in raising student achievement should recognize that everything that's come from Washington has not helped the cause. Funding has only increased over the last 50 plus years. Student achievement is either flat or declining, depending on the time frame that you're looking at. So I think whether or not Congress acts, I think the Secretary does have the authority to shut down some of the programs that the department has run for many years that have not been successful. So the Secretary can take some steps immediately that would begin the process, and then it should be in the best interest of lawmakers if they really want to help students to follow immediately.
In the remaining few seconds we have, what do you think are some of the maybe misperceptions in the argument with potentially shutting down the Department of Education?
Well, I think parents may think that public schools may close or that students would no longer have access to federal meals. But again, the school lunch program is run by the USDA. I think that issues related to children with special needs are essential services that can be handled by other agencies.
Okay.
And crucially, this is something that should happen right away.
All right, Jonathan Butcher with the Heritage Foundation. Thank you so much for your time and for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, an arms race in Europe. Western leaders look to defend themselves from Russia, but will it be enough? That's next on Faith Nation. Welcome back. An emergency meeting today in Brussels as European Union leaders look to quickly increase their military spending while providing support for Ukraine and avoiding further alienating the United States. CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke has the latest on the fallout from President Trump's decision to pause U.S. military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine. So, Caitlin, Trump is also demanding Europe to be better prepared to take care of its own security.
That's right, John. European Union leaders say they've reached a watershed moment as they prepare to rearm Europe. The heads of state from all 27 member countries met in Belgium today, ready to ramp up defense spending to protect not only their own borders, but to support Ukraine. Leaders say it's time to put their money where their mouth is.
This is something that we have been asking for a long time, that the European Union, that Europe is capable of standing up on its own 2 feet. That's why we've been saying we need to scale up, we need to be prepared, we need to produce, and we need to protect.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has proposed a plan to loosen budget rules so those who are willing can spend more on defense. Most of the increased spending would have to come from national budgets, but her proposal also involves $162 billion in loans from the EU for member states to buy military equipment. Now, France has announced this week it's considering extending the protection of its nuclear arsenal to European allies. And while not a part of the European Union, the UK is spearheading efforts to create a plan for ending the war in Ukraine, something they believe must be done in conjunction with the United States.
It's that ability to work with the United States and with our European partners that has kept the peace for 80 years now. That's why it's important we step up into this space.
Meanwhile, as a part of an immigration crackdown, the Trump administration is planning to revoke the temporary legal status for nearly 240,000 Ukrainians who fled to the U.S. after Russia invaded. Officials say the move was already underway before the White House confrontation between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky last week. John?
All right, CBN national security correspondent Caitlin Burke. Thank you, Caitlin. Up next, a hidden chapter of history. A Muslim-majority nation's Christian past filled with faith, sacrifice, and resilience. Discover its forgotten story after this. Welcome back. It may surprise you that Tunisia has rich roots in Christianity dating back centuries. The North African nation's faith history includes the legacy of the early martyrs and continues to shape its spiritual identity today. George Thomas reports from Carthage, Tunisia.
If you're looking for an adventure destination off the beaten path, look no further than Tunisia.
Tunisia is a wonderful nation. We like to call it the Pearl of the Mediterranean. It overlooks the entire Mediterranean Sea and is like a beautiful window to our desert.
Bordered by Algeria, Libya, and the Mediterranean Sea, Tunisia offers a diverse range of landscapes, from beautiful beaches to the vast Sahara Desert. And for certain movie fans,
Tunisia is home of Star Wars. Uncle Owen!
Yeah?
It's the R2 unit has a bad motivator, look!
Hey, what are you trying to push on us?
Tunisia was the filming location for the first 6 Star Wars movies, with sets still visible in the desert. The country also boasts a rich Christian history.
There is this sort of idea that Christianity is this new religion that is coming from the West. No, we're talking about 200 AD, when there was a vibrant church here.
American William Brown has lived here for 22 years. He pastors the Reformed Church of Tunisia. Drive 20 minutes northeast of the capital, Tunis, and you'll arrive at the ancient Roman ruins of Carthage.
The ruins, at least for people of faith, are very powerful.
Carthage served as a significant center of early Christian thought and home to influential church fathers.
You have Cyprian, his work on the unity of the church. You have Augustine, who was not from Carthage, but was from modern-day Algeria, who came over, was a teacher here. You had Tertullian, and Tertullian is very significant because he was a Tunisian lawyer who came to Christ, and he came up with new vocabulary to try to explain Christian concepts. So even this word Trinity that we have is actually originally came from him.
Have mercy upon you.
American Frank Bernardi pastors the St. George's Anglican Church in Tunis. He points to Carthage as an important center of Christianity in the 2nd and 3rd centuries, a thriving hub for the faith that served as the seat of the Christian church for all of North Africa.
What it produced was this really significant, what I like to call high-octane church that had a reputation throughout the world because of how serious they took their faith and how willing they were to die for their faith.
Dr. Corné Becker, Dean of the School of Divinity at Regent University, says Christianity faced resistance from the Roman Empire, suspicious of this flourishing new faith.
Carthage was really a hotbed of persecution, so Christianity comes to Carthage at the beginning of the 2nd century. And right at the beginning of that, there are a number of martyrs.
Saints Perpetua and Felicity were Christian martyrs from the early persecutions of the church in Africa by Emperor Severus.
Among the more famous martyrs are Felicitas and Perpetua, 2 women brought to this amphitheater on March 7th, 203 AD, to face punishment for following Christ. According to historical accounts, Felicity and Perpetua were led out of those gates down this narrow portion of the lower level of the amphitheater. On that March 7th day, tens of thousands of people had presumably gathered on the upper level, anticipating that the 2 Christian women would be eaten alive by wild animals. Instead, the accounts show that the emperor of the day commanded that the 2 women be put to death by sword.
The executioners carried out their duties quickly, though Perpetua had to guide the gladiator's sword to her throat after he first painfully struck a bone instead of a vein.
Their extraordinary commitment to Christ in the face of public scourging, being thrown to wild animals and finally being killed by the sword, would become a witness not only to North Africa, but to the rest of the world.
The Christians back then who accepted the truth sacrificed themselves, and they did not deny Christ and their beliefs.
Mufida is a member of the Christian community here, and we've taken precautions to protect her identity. She tells CBN News their story of Christianity is one of resilience.
I'm related to these martyrs who were among the first Tunisian Christians in my country. My identity is related to them. I belong to something historic and deep-rooted in Tunisia, and that makes me feel even more proud to belong to Christ.
Elijah, a Christian leader here, says that even though the country's Christian community is small, it stands as a living testimony to the enduring power of faith.
It's a challenge to be a believer in Tunisia. But at the same time, it's a pleasure to live the Christian life and share this with others.
The rough estimates are that there are about 30,000 Christians today who reside in Tunisia, 80% of whom are foreigners. Local Tunisian believers number around 5,000. Although a predominantly Muslim country, Tunisia recognizes freedom of religion. Since the Arab Spring uprising almost 14 years ago, the government has embraced more democratic values.
It used to be very hard for Christians to speak openly about Christ and share their faith. Some were beaten and died in jail. There was so much danger and restrictions, but now, slowly with the openness of the environment, things are changing.
Bernardi says Tunisia's spiritual legacy is not only in ancient ruins, but also in the memories of martyrs and theologians. He longs for a resurgence of faith that mirrors the powerful, world-changing Christianity once defined by this region.
I want Christians around the world to pray that that blessing of Carthage, a church of high-octane Christianity that changed the world, I pray that that blessing return to this place.
George Thomas, CBN News, Carthage, Tunisia.
Excellent reporting. Thank you, George. Well, coming up, a fiery rescue caught on camera. Next on Faith Nation.
Download the CBN News app, 24/7 news from a Christian perspective at home or on the road. One place for all of your news. Breaking news alerts. Set daily prayer goals and pray for news stories. Read the most important news and watch CBN News Channel live. CBN News, because truth matters. Go to cbnnewsapp.com to get the app today.
Finally tonight, a New Jersey police officer is being hailed a hero for his bravery in saving another man's life. Officer Noah Alat arrived at a fiery scene following a car crash early Wednesday morning in Bridgewater. 2 vehicles were involved in the accident. The driver of a tanker truck was able to safely exit his vehicle. The driver, however, of the other car was unconscious and trapped in his flaming vehicle. That's when Officer Alat jumped into action.
Are you the only one in the car? Are you the only? Where are they?
The police officer pulled the driver away from the blaze. The man was then treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Officer Alat is being credited with saving his life. Well, thanks for watching. That does it for tonight's Faith Nation. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.